First, let me say how honoured I am to receive this award, and I'm how grateful I am for those very kind words of Professor Foss, which actually seem to me to have said everything that has to be said, in a way, about free speech, that we're under pressure from what is in effect an industry of offence, which is trying not just to silence people like me, but also to claim territory for itself at the expense of others. And I think this is one of the important issues that we need to understand. So let me start from the beginning by asking just what is free speech? What is it exactly? Well, it is obviously a right. It's the right to say what you wish to say, regardless of various things. But regardless of what? And is it a legal right or a moral right? And this is already a question that many of us find difficult to answer. It should be surely a legal right, but it doesn't follow that it's a moral right. There are many things which we have a legal right to do, which we have no moral right to do. I have a legal right to speak angrily to you in this room, but it's not a moral right. I don't want to offend you, and I shouldn't want to offend you. Other actions which people judge to be wrong morally, like, say, adultery, but nevertheless there's a legal right to commit them, because we think that the law should not extend into this private realm in order to confiscate the real moral arguments. But in the case of free speech, we do seem to think that without a legal right that is protected by the law, there's no point that we have really established. We really have to have that legal right if there is to be public discussion about the issues that matter. In some areas, we can protect our right to free speech through civil action. We can bring a case against those who are trying to shut us up. But in many cases, that doesn't seem to be sufficient. If those who are trying to shut us up are anonymous and multitudinous, then it is very difficult to defend ourselves by civil action. So clearly, we ought to have some other means of defence available to us, and that's what thinkers since at least the 19th century have wished that we should have some kind of legal protection for things said honestly and openly in the cause of public discussion. John Stuart Mill famously said that the attempt to silence speech is to deprive not only the person who is uttering something, but also the person who's attempting to silence him of the truth of the matter under consideration. Scientific advance depends upon exposing our beliefs to refutation, and if we try and protect those beliefs from refutation through the law, then we effectively bring the pursuit of truth to an end. But the question is, though, what exactly does the assault on free speech amount to? In the modern world, the world that we share now, there are many ways in which people can be intimidated, which were not available to our ancestors. For example, not just shouting people down in a lecture hall, but engineering a Twitter storm, because somebody has said something. Is that not a way of intimidating, punishing someone for a remark in a way against which we have no defence? Increasingly, we're actually seeing this being used as the way of punishing unorthodox opinions and creating an atmosphere of fear. If you utter the wrong word, it gets around on the internet or through Facebook or Twitter or whatever. The case, Professor Foss already mentioned the case of Sir Tim Hunt, who said at a conference in an out-of-the-way place, South Korea, it was a scientific conference, that it is difficult for men and women to share a laboratory because you tend to fall in love with the women, and when you speak to them crossly, they tend to cry. Now, that's not a very sensible thing to say in public, but immediately there was a Twitter storm activated, and you might say, well, so what? I'm not on Twitter, so why does it matter to me? But it does matter because, of course, it then becomes a matter of public concern. In the end, Sir Tim was reprimanded publicly by the Royal Society, of which he's a fellow, and also had to step down from his job in the University of London as a professor. And his wife too had to do something, was compromised in her career. Now, so there are real consequences of these Twitter storms, and in that particular case, you can see how badly institutions behave in order to protect themselves. Once the storm has happened, even the Royal Society, which has no right whatsoever to reprimand any of its fellows, has to go public with an act of dissociation. In my view, he should have sued the Royal Society for defamation, but he didn't, because by then the poor man was hiding under the table somewhere. So we're fairly clear about the need to protect our right of free speech in the sort of areas that are of importance to us in public discussion. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that there are different kinds of beliefs and different kinds of utterance, some of which have a different standing from scientific utterances. We tend to distinguish, at least we ought to distinguish, beliefs that are protected in some way from beliefs that are open to discussion. All religions have made this distinction, and the concept of blasphemy has something to do with this. There are certain things that, according to the religion, you cannot put in question, or if you put them in question, you mustn't do so publicly, because words have effects, and we protect certain of our beliefs because we're worried about the social effect of criticising them. And this, I think, is a very relevant thing for us today. You can criticise my belief that the earth is spherical, that carbon is an element, or that Shakespeare was not the Earl of Oxford, and I won't feel threatened by you. But if you criticise my belief that Christ died to redeem mankind, or that the Jews are the chosen people, or that the Prophet Muhammad was appointed by God, or if you laugh at these beliefs, then I feel something different. I don't just feel that you're wrong. Depending on where I stand in all the various religions, I might feel deeply hurt. I feel that there's something antagonistic has been said. So, in these protected areas, we think that something more is at stake than just the truth or falsity of the belief in question. And what is that more that is in stake? Now, it's true that even in scientific areas, people try to protect their beliefs. If you have followed the disputes in American education over whether evolution should be taught in schools, or whether, if it is taught, intelligent design should be taught along with it as a possible alternative. These disputes have become heated in just the way that religious disputes are. Some of the scientific, allegedly purely scientific thinkers get hot under the collar when it comes to the question of intelligent design, saying that thou shalt not teach that to children. It is undermining the manifest truth about the human condition, and therefore disadvantaging them in the world to which they are destined. Now, of course, we know, because Karl Popper has pointed it out so successfully, that the sign of a scientific belief is that it's open to refutation. Somebody who doesn't open his beliefs to refutation is not thinking scientifically. That's the mark of a scientific belief. Therefore, the attempt to protect scientific beliefs removes them from the realm of science and puts them in that other realm of the protective beliefs. But what is it that protective beliefs have in common? What distinguishes them? Obviously, religions have such beliefs at their heart, but even people without religion have protected beliefs. Indeed, it's mostly people without religion who are responsible for the kind of censorship that Professor Voss referred to. People who are post-religious, belong to a post-religious communities, but still have just as much need as any pious Muslim for the things that cannot be questioned. It's just that the things that cannot be questioned have changed and are apt to change from one week to the next. So what is it about beliefs that causes people to protect them? I think the principal thing is that they are a sign of membership. They are identity-forming beliefs. You join a community by having these beliefs or by expressing them. You belong with a particular section of humanity, and you enjoy their protection too. So when your self-identity is wrapped up in a belief in that sense, your sense of who you are is also at risk when other people criticize the belief. And criticizing my beliefs is an assault on me. Instead of judging our beliefs in terms of their truth or falsehood, we judge them in terms of whether they're mine or not mine. But what happens when you take religion away? In effect, you can take religion away from people, but you cannot destroy in them their desire for membership, their desire to be part of something that in some way includes them and protects their thinking from adverse encounters around them. And people still need this sense of identity, even if they have no belief in God and no religious ceremony with which to rehearse it. They still claim it. And this is essentially what has happened in our time, I think, that we have found the emergence after the dwindling of Christian faith of negative identities. People make for themselves identities which are not built around what they are for, but what they're against. This phenomenon rose very much to the top of the European experience in the 20th century, where with communism and Nazism and so on, in which new identities were on offer, for which you could claim purely on the strength of what you hated. If you hated the Jews, you're a long way along the path of becoming a proper Nazi and enjoying the protection that it offered. Likewise, if you hated the bourgeoisie, you got a long way along that identity which was offered by the Communist Party. Now, all those totalitarian ways of giving people identity have vanished more or less from the possibilities available to people. But there are other negative identities that are still clearly available, nevertheless. This is essentially what we've seen emerging in universities. What one might call the victim identities. If you can claim identity with a victim group, whatever that group might be, claim its history of persecution as defining your position, you've gained an enormous advantage in the competition for scarce resources, especially in the academic world. We've seen this obviously with feminism, which has its roots in perfectly legitimate speculations from the Enlightenment onwards about the relation between men and women and their distinct roles in society and the validity or otherwise of the way in which women have been treated. But in American universities from the 1960s onwards, feminism, instead of becoming a form of rational reflection on the condition of women, became a negative identity. You joined the feminist movement by way of identifying with women as victims of men, of course. And then out of that negative identity, all kinds of beliefs emerged. For example, the belief that the family is a patriarchal organisation in which men exert control over women in order to reproduce. They're using women as slaves in order to generate children who will be advancing their social power and so on. Those beliefs that emerged then out of the negative identity became beliefs which were protected. You couldn't question them. And I think you will find in many American universities today courses of so-called gender studies in which are built around these protected beliefs which cannot be questioned. Beliefs about the nature of men, what they do to women, and so on, which are truths which are immovable. So this invention of victim classes and then claiming membership of them, I think is an extremely important tool in the hands of people who don't have the support of a religion, but nevertheless need an identity. The victim identity is an identity which you can define against the surrounding order. You're standing up for the oppressed against all these comfortable people who have taken all the rewards from you, and you are entitled, therefore, to move aggressively against your surroundings. It's not for your own sake you're doing this; it's for the sake of women or gays, or now it's transsexuals. It's whatever it might be, the cause of the moment. So you can justify your indignation in this way without actually paying the cost of it, because after all, you've never yourself been a victim. You're a well-funded member of the middle classes with a free education in a university and all the rest. But nevertheless, you can claim an advantage over the people competing with you for the rewards of the academic life by identifying in this way with the victims. Now, as I say, all human beings need identities, an identity in that sense. Living as a pure individual, according to Enlightenment standards of rational thought, putting every matter to the question, this is jolly hard. That's what we think a university is for, of course, that hard work, hard form of life in which you put everything to the test of critical argument. But it's not something that most of us are capable of. So, and certainly not the mass of the students who enter a university in that fragile period of life when you are looking for an identity of your own. So it's not surprising that these negative identities flourish on university campuses, in particular among students who have nothing, who want nothing when they come there, nothing materially, except something like this. So why does this lead, though, to this assault on free speech everywhere? I think the crucial matter to grasp is that when it comes to a protected belief, it's not the falsehood of what the other person says that upsets you, it's the truth. It's only truth, therefore, that is censored. But we see this, obviously in the famous case of the Church and Galileo. Galileo wouldn't have mattered at all to the Church had he been pouring out obvious falsehoods about the heavens and the relation of the sun to them and so on, sun to the earth. But it's because he was saying true things that he had to be shut up. Likewise, anybody who raises in an objective, philological frame of mind the question of the origin of the Quran, he has to be shut up, because the truth about it is incompatible with all kinds of things upon which people have built a way of life. Likewise with the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century that shut up all their critics. What their critics were saying was objectionable because of its truth. And so if you build your life on a falsehood, you must fight to the death against the truth. And I think this is what we see even with these little negative victim identities that I've been referring to. That there is a fight to the death about those things upon which identities have been built. And there's a real question for our civilization as to whether we can live with the open Enlightenment frame of mind that doesn't allow these fights to the death, which says, that's your problem if you feel that about this belief, and learns to laugh at it. So we experience the same need, as I say, for identity-forming beliefs, and when we find them, we protect them. But the question is, how are they protected, and is there a way of undoing the protection so that we can expose some of these beliefs to critical argument and at least not suffer the cost of being censored and outcast and even violently attacked for our raising the question of them. Now, I think we need to look back over the recent 20 or 30 years of history and the rise of political correctness in this context. Political correctness is obviously a way of attacking communities on behalf of potential victim classes. And it has gone hand in hand with radical censorship. First of all, the invention of isms and phobias. This is a very significant thing that has happened in my lifetime. It began with the invention of the concept of racism. Now we all know that there is such a thing as believing that a given race or community of human beings has properties different from another one, and maybe is superior to the other one, and maybe justifies therefore the superior race taking over. We all know from the history of colonialism that there are ways of thinking about other sections of humanity that are demeaning of them, and that we ought not to indulge in. And so that there is something, there's a real historical truth that we're referring to, including obviously the truth of slavery and the more brutal forms of colonialism. But when the word racist became a standard accusation against people in superior positions in our society, it wasn't that was being criticised. That was long in the past, all that. What was being criticised was usually a word that had been used wrongly, the revelation of an attitude that could be, when properly examined, regarded as a heresy. It was a genuine witch hunt, which involved penalising people for having raised questions. Even Professor Foss referred to the Hungerford case that I was involved in my country, where a mild-mannered, gentle but patriotic headmaster raised the question as to whether we were treating our immigrant communities rightly by regarding their culture as untouchable. Shouldn't we be in our school introducing their children to the culture here that they're destined to be in, rather than letting them absorb beliefs and customs which, quite frankly, we regard as unacceptable? It's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, but that was racism. It was racism because it was making a distinction which had adverse implications for the society that he was writing about. But once racism got going, all sorts of other isms and phobias came in the wake of it. I'm just to take the case of Islamophobia. This extraordinary mental disease occurred suddenly in the whole of the Western world on September the 10th in 2001. September 11th, 2001. Suddenly it was there. Hadn't been there before. And we have to ask ourselves, why did this disease suddenly appear? And why were we all guilty of it? Of course, because it served a very useful purpose, which was to prevent open and free discussion of what had happened on that day, and what it was about Islam, if anything, which motivated people to act in that way. So since then we've had lots of other isms and phobias, and you've had them here in Denmark too. In fact, Scandinavian people are even more quick than Anglo-Saxons to pick this up. Homophobia is a mental crime here, just as it is in my country. It's just that you don't know how to commit it. Because if you just, as we had to open discussion about whether there should be gay marriage in our country, it was never explained to us at the time when we began this discussion that if you took one side of it, that accused you automatically of homophobia. So it's clear that you can fall into that crime just like that, because the definition is constantly shifting. I was brought up in Cambridge University in the post-war period, in which it was perfectly normal, of course, that people engaged in that sort of activity. I was judged adversely because I differed from the surroundings in three important respects. I was lower class, right-wing, and heterosexual. And that combination in Cambridge of my day was regarded as so vulgar that I was almost outside the reach of polite discourse. But nevertheless, nobody would have thought that this was grounds for censoring what I had to say when we discussed these issues. Of course not. It was all part of the surrounding world. It was only much later that suddenly it became impossible to discuss the issue of homosexuality without committing this undefined crime. Nobody knows when the word phobia is used. Nobody respects its ancient Greek meaning, which means fear. It's come to mean now irrational hatred of somebody on some particular grounds. Something which, had I had that irrational hatred as a young man, I'd have had no friends. And it's still true today, I guess. So this invention of labels is a very important part of political correctness. And it's part of a more general custom, which is that of controlling the speech around a particular issue. If we can control the speech around that issue, it becomes impossible to have more than one view of it. And George Orwell anticipated this very brilliantly in his famous novel 1984, which I'm sure most of you know, when he invented the idea of newspeak. The party controlling the society of that imagined totalitarian state invented a language in which only the things acceptable to the party could be expressed. There wasn't any room for disagreement anymore, because newspeak simply erased the words used that might be used to express disagreement. And I think that's to some extent what we're seeing in political correctness, taking away the words that we might use in order to express disagreement. In the case of homosexuality, obviously, that word has been taken away. You have to use a word like gay instead. Again, in the discussion of relations with the Islamic world, the language is very carefully controlled. There are things that you cannot say and things that you can't say. And we've had a recent example of this, that the language is constantly changing in order to prevent new things being said. This is the case of Germaine Greer, who came to speak in one of our universities. Now, she was one of the original radical feminists who believed that that men really are oppressive, that women as a sex have lived under the thumb of the other sex, the unfair sex, which is mine, and that she has made her life out of propagandizing this and showing the extent to which the male is assumed as the dominant cultural figure in our literature, in painting, music, and so on. And of course, she has cast an awful lot of light on our literary tradition in this way. I mean, she's very much respected, of course, as an outspoken literary figure. But she, giving a university lecture at some point on this, touched on the transgender issue and didn't realise that she should be using the word gender and not the word sex. And she said that men are of one sex and women of another sex, and the fact that a man thinks that he's a woman doesn't mean he's of the female sex. Had she used the correct language and said that, you know, the fact that he thinks he's of the female gender means that he is of the female gender, that would have been all right. But she fell off the edge of the permitted forms of expression and used the word sex properly, and of course exposed what was lurking behind the word gender, namely the desire to make everything a matter of choice, to spread freedom into all the areas where freedom is impossible. So she unwittingly exposed the lie behind a new version of the sexual war. And as a result, she became the latest target for censorship. No platform can be offered to her because she's shown this disrespect for the possibility of transgender identity. She is guilty of transphobia. And that word is now in the vocabulary. You might, we'll have to see just what its subsequent history will be. But anyway, one thing that has been achieved by that particular movement, the radical feminist movement in our universities, is in effect to get rid of the word sex. Because sex refers to a biological fact, which we can't deny, it interferes with the freedom and the aspirations of those people who want to deny it. It's created a new victim class, the class of the people who can't stand the truth about biology, human biology. So it has been replaced by the word gender, and now you will see on all official forms, you know, the word sex doesn't appear. In my passport, I'm of male gender. Insofar as I've ever thought about what gender I am, I have thought, well, you know, it would be nice to be more feminine than I am. You know, that does seem like something that you can choose. But as for my sex, no. So this here is a way in which total obscurity has entered into an issue which is of vital importance to all human beings, which is sexual identity, by confiscating the very word with which it could be expressed, the word sex. So we have got to a very strange position with this this kind of political correctness, and there's a real question of what we might do about it. I think Professor Foss has touched on this, and I will just say a few words in conclusion. We all recognise that, as I said at the beginning, that it's morally wrong to give gratuitous offence to people. You know, we can't say that we're within our moral rights if we insult people or laugh at their religion or whatever it might be. But the point is not about morality, it's about legality. We still need a legal order in which people are free to do that if we are to explore the possibilities available to us, and also if we are to resolve our conflicts. You know, many of our conflicts today are about protected beliefs. They are about people wanting to stop discussion of issues. And we are living in a society where there are issues arising which really must be discussed. In particular, of course, the religion, the contest between Islamic and Christian or post-Christian worldviews. It has got to be discussed, otherwise we won't know where we are or how to incorporate new communities, how to reconcile ourselves to their way of life and so on. But at the moment we're in a position of ossified silence about this matter of such importance to us. So although it's morally wrong to give offence, it should be legally permissible. On the other hand, there's a further problem, and as Professor Foss remarked, there's a new kind of person emerging who's expert in taking offence. In fact, gender studies in our universities is a kind of 3-year concentrated discipline in taking offence. And whatever you say, somebody will step in and accuse you of this. And the Hunt case is just one example. And I think we will see more and more examples of this kind. So we have to recognise that we're in a society where people are essentially taking offence for a purpose. It's the cost-free way of gaining superiority over your interlocutor. If you can say, what you said has offended me, I'm offended as a woman, a gay, or whatever I might choose to identify myself as, you've got the upper hand without paying the genuine cost of that, which is having a good argument. And so this is a really serious assault on rationality in public discourse. And the answer to it, as I see it, is not to be intimidated and to laugh at the person who takes offence. We do have to cultivate the sense of humour. This is the thing that eventually cured us of Puritanism. In the 17th century, laughter was very difficult in Britain, even more difficult in Massachusetts. But gradually people learned to laugh at it. Butler's famous poem Hudibras, which mocked the Puritans of 17th century England, did us a tremendous amount of good. And gradually American literature learned to laugh at this. And I think that tradition of satire is a precious achievement of our civilization. But it's interesting that it's precisely our disposition to laugh at the absurdities of radical Islam which is now being silenced by everyone, or by them, and by the politically correct on behalf of them. So this is where the fight begins, and all I can say is that prominent among those who fought this fight was, of course, the Free Speech Society here, which has suffered for it, but nevertheless is setting an example to us all. I guess this is the point where I should end, because I've looked through my repertoire of jokes for one that can be told that would be suitable to end on, and I couldn't find one. The matter is far too serious. Thank you.